The night I buried my husband, I discovered that his wine glass had been changed. The three most powerful men in town were there, looking at me like a corpse about to be buried again. When I saw the strange lipstick on the whiskey glass, I knew my husband had not died naturally. And then, I drank that glass of wine. I should have collapsed next to him, but I did not die. That could only mean one thing. Whoever poisoned my husband did not want me to live to see this day. My husband's funeral was held in a small chapel next to the square. It was chilly, the smell of white candles mixed with the smell of rotting wood. I stood for 2 hours, my hands numb in thin black gloves, answering the same question over and over again. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. I'll try to get through it. I didn't see anyone really in pain. They came in large numbers to maintain appearances, then gathered in groups of 3 or 5 to talk about politics, mining, gold prices. I heard it clearly. Emberfall was small enough that sad news was a form of weekend entertainment. There were 2 glasses of whiskey on the altar table. One was mine, one was his. His glass had a red lipstick mark on it. I stopped at the first second. I didn't wear that color lipstick, and my husband hated the smell of lipstick on his glasses. And yet he had drunk that night. I called the waiter. He bowed his head unusually low, as if afraid I would look at him eyes. When I asked who had changed the glass, he answered vaguely, his words incoherent, sweat dripping despite the cold room. I didn't need proof. Just the look on his face was enough to tell me he was covering for someone. I glanced around the corner. The mayor, the sheriff, the mine owner, 3 men who could silence a town with a tap of a pen. They hadn't come to offer condolences. They'd come to confirm that Scarlet Veil suspected nothing. I continued to stand, looking at my husband's body. His face was pale, his lips a pale purple, his fingernails a little black. I'd studied basic medicine at the aid station. I knew the signs. Poisoning, not a stroke. I didn't cry. I took the remaining glass and brought it to my nose. The smell of almonds. Too obvious. I took a small sip, deliberately. If they wanted me dead, I wanted to know what kind of enemy I was facing. The whiskey slid down my throat, the bitterness spreading quickly. I put the glass down, clenching my fists until they hurt, burning inside my gloves. In that instant, I knew 3 things. My husband was murdered. Those 3 people standing in the corner were involved. And I, after that sip of wine, would be the second person in the coffin today. I adjusted my veil, stood up, and walked away from the crowd. Outside the funeral home, a cold wind blew in, enough to sober me up. No one ran after me to ask if I was okay. That was the moment I understood. In Emberfall, I was completely alone. I walked away, and only one thought remained in my mind. If justice here is a sham, I will rewrite the rules. After the funeral, I slept for only 10 minutes. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just sat in the empty room, looking at the 3 things that remained of our marriage. Our wedding ring, the jacket he'd worn, and the death certificate that I knew was fake. I knew one thing very clearly. If I continued living as Scarlet Veil, I would die. Quickly and quietly. They had the power, they had the money, they had the guns in someone else's hands. I had only one choice: disappear, literally. Preparing for death. I made a list in my head like a rescue plan. Erase all remaining traces of property, collect papers, letters, the smallest evidence, use the ashes as evidence of my death, reappear under a different name. I cut my hair, changed all my clothes, burned old letters, not out of nostalgia, but because any signature or handwriting could kill me again. Alone in the empty house, I said to myself out loud to stay awake, "If you want revenge, you have to live first." That sentence sounded cold, but it was the only truth left. The fire. At midnight, I sprinkled alcohol around the living room. Not much. Just enough for the police to conclude sudden explosion due to a gas leak. I took off my wedding ring and placed it next to the faded wedding photo frame. It would be evidence of the body they could not find. For the first time in 7 years, I left the house without looking back. I lit a match. The flames were quick, not fierce, just consuming, just like they had consumed my life. The smell clung to my coat, the smell of the past. When the house began to boom with a clean sound, I was on horseback, riding out of Emberfall along the farm track. No one saw me. No one called my name. News of my death. As dawn approached, I stopped at the old rest stop on the edge of town. People gathered around the radio, talking loudly. I stood in the crowd, hood up, listening quietly. Breaking news! The Vale house exploded at 3 in the morning. The police think the couple burned to death in the house. A woman sighed. Poor thing, to die like that. I took a deep breath. Scarlet Vale was buried. No grave needed. No candle needed. I adjusted my hand, covering the slight burn from the embers, and looked straight at the road leading to the unknown. From now on, I was no longer a widow. I was no longer a target. I was invisible, and invisible people were easier to kill. End of chapter cliffhanger. Just as I turned to leave the inn, a patrolman galloped up, shouting, "The sheriff has ordered a manhunt! There are signs that someone from the Vale family escaped the fire!" I clenched my jaw. They still didn't believe I was dead. They still wanted to be sure. Fine. If they wanted to hunt, I would become the hunter first. Goi thuê bao Google One. Se bi hui. Hãy cập nhật phương thức thanh toán của bạn chậm nhất vào ngày 2 tháng 11, 2025 để gia hạn gói thuê bao của bộ nhớ. Chapter 3. The Red Veil. After the news of my arrest, it took me 3 days to disappear from the map of Emberfall. I changed my name, my voice, and bought a cheap black horse from a drunkard on the outskirts. On the 4th night, I went to Lantern's Edge, a tavern off the beaten path where rumors outlive people. I entered with my veil drawn low. It was dark, and the smell of cigarettes and stale beer was as thick as the dust on the ceiling. I ordered a whiskey, sat at the last table, and watched my first target, the gambler who had traded drinks at the funeral. He was gambling, smiling, his eyes blinking to the rhythm of the cards. There was no trace of guilt. His voice boomed. In Emberfall, winnings wash away everything, even karma. I stood up and approached the table. He looked up, a little hesitant, perhaps because of the red veil. He asked, "Who are you?" I replied, "You need an explanation." He sneered, thinking I was joking. I pulled out a chair, sat down opposite, and put a gold coin on the table. A real answer. One game only. I win, you say. You win, I disappear. The people around cheered. He agreed. The game went quickly. He was confident. I didn't need to win with cards. I won with information. As he concentrated on counting the cards, I slowly whispered, "The night of the funeral, the wine glass, the lipstick is not mine." His hand skipped a beat. "I know you were hired. I just want to know the voice of the one giving the orders." Without waiting for his reaction, I turned over the last card. He lost. He turned pale, was about to get up and leave, when the bar light suddenly went out. In the darkness, there was the sound of a chair falling, the sound of a wine bottle breaking. I heard the faint sound of a gun being loaded. Not mine. The oil lamp was rekindled. At the first moment of light, a gun was aimed at me, and the gambler disappeared from his chair. The hired gun growled, "The sheriff has sent word. If the prey is not dead, the hunter will come and finish it himself." I did not answer. I pushed the table hard, the wine glass swirling in a red streak on the floor. He pulled the trigger. Bang! A clean, close-to-ear sound. I darted aside, rolling down the narrow corridor leading to the back door. People in the bar were screaming, running in panic. Gun smoke mixed with the smell of burning whiskey. Once out the door, I pulled out my gun and fired a warning shot into the sky. I did not aim at him. I just needed to shake off the tail, not create a body. The sound of horse hooves echoed from the stable. He gave chase. I rode into the night, breathing heavily, the wind blowing hard. Behind, he was still following. I understood. The hunt had begun. And this time, they did not need secrecy. Just as I emerged from the trail, an arrow bearing the council's emblem struck down in front of me, narrowly missing my horse's head. I froze. It could only mean this. It wasn't just someone in the dark chasing me. It was the council that had ordered the attack. I knew the rules of the hunt. To live, you had to hit the leader. Emberfall had 3 heads: the mayor, the mine owner, the pastor. Each held a key. The mayor. Entering the town office was not as difficult as leaving it with a file. I went in through the night delivery door, my hat pulled low, holding a box of printer's ink. Inside were a box camera and a punch. The archives were on the ground floor. The lock was loose. I looked for the Trail Improvement Fund. The number didn't match the wood purchase receipt. I took photos of each page, stapled them back together exactly as before. The next morning, the mayor's wife received a brown envelope on her doorstep. Inside were copies of the expenses and a photo of her husband with his secretary at the suburban vacation home. In the afternoon, the second-floor curtains were closed. At night, the mayor asked for leave for health reasons. I called it the paper plague. The mine owner. He believed in steel and protection, not in soft things like payroll. I met the assistant accountant at the breakfast shop. I said bluntly, "You were forced to sign 2 sets of books, one for the shareholders, one for the board. I need the real thing." He looked down at his ink-stained hand. "I don't want trouble." "You're in trouble. I'll give you a way out." That night, I received the explosives allocation sheet. The amount spent on assistant diggers was exactly the same as the amount used to destroy the illegal tunnel that led to the small mine owned by the villagers. I sent a copy to the state safety assessor through a neutral courier. 3 days later, the mine was shut down for serious safety violations. The mine owner didn't fall from the explosion. He slipped on the number, the pastor. I went to confession that rainy night, sitting in a narrow wooden room, smelling of turpentine and old paper. I told the story of a widow who smelled almonds in her husband's wine glass. The voice on the other end trembled slightly, asking for his name. I was silent. "You want God to forgive you?" "I want the truth." I dropped a red envelope into the confessional. Inside was a photo of the pastor receiving donations, and headed straight for the mine owner's warehouse. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for a list. Who had attended the prayer meeting the night before my husband died? At midnight, the church door opened, and the paper slid out onto the steps. The handwriting was shaky, but the names were clear. 3 quick, clean blows, no bang. Rumors spread. Emberfall began to cough from the fumes of what they thought was pure. I returned to my cheap lodgings on the edge of town, took off the veil, and spread the documents on the table. Expense photos, suspension orders, prayer lists. The puzzle was coming together. But the hand that wrote the script was still missing. The doorbell rang. No one in the hallway. On the carpet was a white envelope tied with a red thread. Good paper, black ink. I opened it. A typewritten memo, dated the night my husband died. First line, cup replacement plan, sealed. Last line, post-funeral home treatment. At the bottom was a familiar signature, straight and neat as a box cutter. Julian Crow, the man who had promised to take me out of Emberfall. The man who had taught me how to read the small print at the bottom of the contract. I stood still for a long time. Outside, a drizzle fell steadily on the tin roof. On the paper, a small, crooked red mark, the same color as my veil. Cliffhanger. I blew out the light. The next night, I would see Julian, not to ask why, but to see how he wanted to live. I met Julian in the new City Hall's conference room number 3. An empty room, frosted glass doors, low yellow light, a long wooden table, leather chairs that smelled new. I chose this place because there were no cameras and because I wanted to see his face in real light, not the photos in the envelope. He arrived on time. Same ash gray suit, black tie, well-polished shoes. No rush, no tension, just dangerously calm. I didn't pull down my veil. Let him guess. Julian spoke first. "Scarlett, I know it was you," I replied shortly. "I thought you were dead in your memory." He chuckled, as if this were just a business negotiation. I placed his signed memo on the table and slid it across the table. Explain. 1 sentence. Don't be long. He looked at the paper for a long time, then said, "There is no love in politics, Scarlett. There is only agreement. Your husband signed an agreement that I took advantage of. I did not kill him. I just opened the door for someone else to do the rest." I fixed my eyes on him. "And you kept quiet and let me lose everything?" Julian replied, his voice even. "If you had not changed the tasting glass that night, you would have died with him now. I want you to live." I almost laughed. That argument was so stupid and cruel that it suited Emberfall. He leaned over, lowered his voice. "In this city, no one is innocent, not even the person you want revenge on. Do you think your husband is the only victim?" I did not answer. Julian opened the briefcase, took out 3 new photos. He put each one on the table, flipped through them slowly. Photos of my husband meeting the mayor privately, signing a stack of papers. A photo of my husband and the mine owner, shaking hands in the underground tunnel. A photo of my husband kissing a strange woman at the motel. "He's not innocent," Julian said. "I'm taking revenge for losing him. But he never belonged to me. I just don't know." The room suddenly became crowded. I stood up, took a step back to get enough breath. I spoke slowly, clearly, word by word. "No matter how bad he was, you still signed the murder plan. And I'll still end it all." Julian looked at me, not challenging, not afraid, just sad for a moment, then disappeared very quickly. "If you had gone with me back then," he said, "that night wouldn't have happened." I smiled faintly. "If you hadn't betrayed me back then, today you wouldn't have had to choose between power and life." I turned to walk away, but he said the last sentence of the chapter, the one that stopped me. "Scarlett, I still love you, but if you continue, I will have to do it, not out of hatred, but for survival." I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle. Without turning, I replied, "Then from now on, we will see who lives longer." I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, and at that moment gunshots rang out from downstairs. Chaos, screams, sirens. A guard ran up, his face pale. "Red Widow has been spotted in the east. The chief has ordered a lockdown of the entire town." I clenched my fists. There was a third person involved, and it had just borrowed my name. The sound of gunfire in the lobby of the town hall made me realize something at once. Julian wasn't the only threat in this room. There was someone else using the name of Red Widow, someone bold enough to burn down Emberfall just to erase me from the board. I dashed for the fire escape at the back of the building. Julian called after me, "Scarlett, if you run, they'll shoot first. Ask questions later." I replied without stopping. "Even if I stand still, they'll do the same." I reached the ground floor and joined the panicked crowd. Soldiers aimed their guns at the shadows more than at the real ones. I ran through the back door and ran to the row of warehouses next to the square, not to hide, but to regain the initiative. Inside the warehouse, I closed the door and pulled out the map of the town I'd hidden. On it, I circled 3 points of power: sheriff's station, church, mine. If someone impersonates Red Widow, where will they strike next? The answer is obvious: the sheriff's office. He's the one leading the hunt. I load my gun, tighten the grip, not to start a fight, but to force the identity of the mastermind behind it. Just as I'm about to leave the warehouse, the door opens. Julian appears, breathing heavily, empty-handed. Julian: "I can't take on the entire council alone." Me: "Can you stand up for me?" Julian: "No." I look him straight in the eye. "Then don't get in my way." He blocks the door, speaking quickly, in a low voice. "The impersonator isn't one of your people. He's one of the sheriff's. He wants to pin the entire blame on Red Widow, on you. Once the warrant is issued, no one can save you, not even me." Me: "Good. To catch the wolf, you have to make a nest first." Julian: "Scarlett, listen." I interrupted. "Julian, we're not on the same side anymore." I pushed him aside and stepped out into the street. The drizzle was falling again. Emberfall had never been so peaceful. The sheriff's lights were shining white at the end of the street. I rode toward it. When I was a few houses away, a warning shot whistled overhead. The loudspeaker blared, "Red Widow, the encirclement is complete. Drop your weapons and kneel." The whole neighborhood was blocked. Soldiers on the roofs, guns aimed. But they forgot one thing. I hadn't run here to escape, but to force the sheriff to show himself to the entire town. I raised my hand deliberately loud. "Chief, if you want to arrest me, come out yourself, or are you afraid your people will hear the truth about the night of the wine glass?" The soldiers stirred, a moment's hesitation. Then he appeared on the steps, Chief Reed, face cold, hand on his holster. "Reed, there is no truth here, only orders." "Me." "Then I will show Emberfall. Who gave the orders? And for what?" I threw out the photo album and the papers I had prepared, evidence of him taking money, exchanging glasses, staging the scene. The wind blew the papers across the street. People watched. Soldiers watched. Reed understood. No more turning around. He pulled out his gun. I pulled too. The trigger was compressed in a breath, and just as we were about to pull the trigger, a third shot rang out from the opposite roof. Not mine, nor Reed's. The bullet went straight for Julian, who had just appeared behind me. The bullet missed Julian. It hit the lamppost behind him, sparking. I pulled him away into the narrow alley. The rain began to fall, heavy, thick, as if the sky wanted to erase all traces of this night. Julian gasped, still clutching his side. Julian. "Scarlett, you shouldn't be here." Me. "I have to be here tonight." I pressed him against the brick wall, strangling him by the collar, the yellow streetlight shining in his eyes, the eyes that had made me believe I was loved. Me. "You know who shot me, right?" Julian was silent. I pressed the gun to his chest. Me. "Speak." Julian. "It was the rest of the council. It wasn't just the three I beat. There was a fourth." I let go. My chest grew colder with each beat. Me. "Name?" Julian. "Richard Vale." I paused, a name I didn't expect to hear. Vale, my husband's family name. Me. "What did you say?" Julian. "Your husband was an innocent, Scarlett, and he didn't die because he betrayed the council. He died because he wanted to be the leader. He was willing to sell everything, including you." I watched the rain fall on the pavement, like cold lines cutting into my memory. Me. "He promised to leave Emberfall with me, to start over." Julian. "That promise was only to keep you in your place, Scarlett. A good wife, not asking too many questions, not knowing too much." I chuckled, not because I was sad, but because the twist of fate was so funny, it was almost numbing. Me. "So I avenged someone who also deserved to go to the grave." Julian. "I'm not avenging him. I'm avenging myself, for what they took from me. Choice." For a long moment, no one said anything. There was only the sound of rain, the sound of pouring drinks from the bar a block away, and the smell of cigarette smoke mixed with wet asphalt. I looked at Julian. Me. "What about you? Whose side are you on?" Julian. "On me." Me. "That's not my question." Julian looked straight at me, not avoiding me. Julian. "Scarlett, I loved you once, and that's still true. But to survive in this city, I had to choose sides. I chose power. I chose the truth that was right for me." Me. "Thank you. The answer is clear." I moved closer, my face only a foot from his. Me. "You love me. But if you need to, you can still shoot, right?" Julian. "Yes." I nodded. I put my hand on his cheek and kissed him. A short, cold kiss with no future. A farewell, not a rebirth. Then I put the gun in Julian's hand. Me. "Now choose, you or me. No more gray areas, no more in between." Julian clenched the stock. Rain ran down his face. I saw his hand shake, for the first time. We stood still at a crossroads. One chose to kill me and preserve his power. The other chose to come with me and become the hunted. Julian. "If you don't pull the trigger..." Me. Then you've already chosen. At that moment, the moment he lowered the gun, a shout rang out from the end of the alley. "Red Widow! Surrounded!" Headlights illuminated my face. Soldiers. Lots of them. Julian backed away. I slowly raised my hands, not to surrender, but to distract for the next step. Headlights flashed in my face, guns aimed. The smell of gunpowder, rain, and wet earth mingled together, as strong as a wound that hadn't healed yet. I stood in the middle of the flooded street, my hands raised, but my mind was colder than the gun. If they wanted to catch Red Widow, let them see Red Widow clearly. I took a step back, just enough to make the soldiers lose their reflexes, and kicked the wooden crate next to the wall. It rolled down, sending the kerosene lamps spilling onto the street. Fire erupted. Soldiers cursed. The formation was in disarray. I dashed into the narrow alley, my back against the wall, breathing heavily. Julian emerged from the darkness, his shirt soaked with rain, his face pale. Julian. "Scarlet, follow me. Now. You have a way out." Me. "I'm not running anymore." Julian. "You don't understand. The council will set up a mock trial. Read the verdict before you enter the courtroom. You'll disappear as if you never existed." Me. "So, I'll let them exist?" He clenched his fists, trying to hold back something, regret or fear. Julian. "I don't want to confront you." Me. "But I will if that's the way to live, right?" Julian. "Yes." I moved closer, my face close to his. Me. "So tonight, I live. Or you live. But there's no more us." Outside, the loudspeakers blared. "Surround the civilian area. Red Widow is armed. Shoot if you resist." Julian grabbed my hand, pulling me into the porch of the old warehouse to get out of range. Inside the warehouse, the yellow light from the oil lamp flickered. The wooden walls were damp. The old crates. No one but me and Julian. Julian. "I can get you out of here, but I have to leave Emberfall behind, leave revenge behind, leave the name Red Widow behind." Me. "And you?" Julian. "I will disappear with you." I chuckled. A deadpan laugh. Me. "You talk like a man who loves, but you live like a man who chooses sides." Julian. "You want me to kneel before you?" Me. "No, I just want you to stand up and tell the truth." A long silence. Finally, Julian said, "Julian, I didn't kill your husband, but I let it happen, because I think you deserve freedom more than a life locked up next to a rotten man, Scarlet. The freedom you speak of, it was paid for with my blood." Julian. "I know." The wind blew. The oil lamp swayed violently. The rain pounded on the tin roof like a hammer. I pulled out the gun, put it in his hand. No shaking. No anger, just clarity. Me. "Kill me, Julian. Just one shot. You wipe me out. I keep my life. Emberfall stays." Julian. "Scarlet." Me. "Or you let me go, and from tonight, Emberfall will bleed to the last of the council." Two people. One gun. A city about to explode outside the wooden door. Julian held the gun for a long time. He looked at me like a flame he wanted to touch, but was afraid of being burned. Finally, he dropped the gun. "Julian, go, if this is your choice." I nodded, not in thanks, just in confirmation. I walked to the warehouse door, but before I left, I said one last thing. Me. "Julian, if your conscience wakes up one day, don't look for me. I'm not on the side of the light." Julian looked down at the gun lying in the rain puddle. Julian. "I know." Outside, the soldiers were still looking. But I had something they didn't. The motivation to disappear and a reason to return. I rode out of the center, over the rusted iron bridge, and over the last slope leading out of Emberfall. Behind me, the council archives exploded, lighting up half the sky. No evidence, no trial. I let Emberfall burn itself out. The red veil fluttered behind me, long like a trail of blood trailed by the wind. I said to myself, barely audible, "Justice is not pure. It only changes color with the hand holding it." I am no longer Scarlet Veil. I am no longer a widow. I am Red Widow, and I am still breathing.